Deep in California is one of the hottest and driest places on Earth, Death Valley. A landscape filled with salt flats, mountains, and endless desert. Most people think of Death Valley as a place with no water at all. But every once in a while, something unbelievable happens. A lake appears right in the middle of the desert. Visitors who once walked across dry ground have later returned to see water stretching across the valley, and even people kayaking there. So how does a lake suddenly appear in one of the driest places in North America? And why does it disappear again? This is the strange story of Death Valley's disappearing lake. The ancient lake hidden beneath the desert. The temporary lake forms in an area called Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, at 282 feet below sea level. Today, Badwater Basin looks like a giant white desert covered in salt. But thousands of years ago, this place was underwater. During the Ice Age, a massive lake called Lake Manly filled the valley. At its peak, it stretched around 100 miles long. Over time, the climate became hotter and drier, and the lake disappeared, leaving behind the salt flats we see today. But sometimes, the ancient lake briefly returns. How does a lake appear in Death Valley? Death Valley is surrounded by mountains. When major storms hit the region, rainwater rushes down from the mountains into the valley below. Because the desert ground is extremely dry and hard, it can't absorb water quickly. So the water flows across the surface and collects in Badwater Basin like water filling a giant bowl. If enough rain falls fast enough, the desert transforms into a shallow lake. The salt flats become covered in reflective water, creating mirror-like views of the mountains and sky. For a short time, one of the driest places on Earth becomes incredibly beautiful. The 2023 storm that brought the lake back. One of the most dramatic examples happened in 2023, when Hurricane Hilary moved through Southern California. Death Valley received historic rainfall in a place that normally gets less than 2 inches of rain a year. Flash floods rushed through the desert, roads were damaged, and parts of the national park closed. But after the storm passed, Badwater Basin filled with water once again. The ancient lake had returned. Photographers traveled from around the world to capture the rare sight of a lake in the middle of Death Valley. Some visitors even brought kayaks and paddled across the water, something that sounds almost impossible in a place famous for deadly heat. Why does the lake disappear? The lake doesn't last because Death Valley is extremely hot and dry. Once the storms stop, the water begins evaporating almost immediately. There are no rivers constantly feeding the lake, and very little regular rainfall to replace the water. Day by day, the lake shrinks until it disappears completely. What remains behind is salt. For thousands of years, water has carried minerals into the basin. When the water evaporates, those minerals stay behind, creating the famous white salt flats. Why is Death Valley so extreme? Death Valley holds the record for the hottest air temperature ever reliably recorded on Earth. In 1913, temperatures at Furnace Creek reached 134 degrees Fahrenheit. The valley's geography traps heat like a giant natural oven. Since the basin sits below sea level and is surrounded by mountains, hot air becomes trapped inside and temperatures continue rising. That's why the appearance of water here feels so unbelievable. A place known for extreme heat can suddenly look like a peaceful lake. A desert full of life. Despite its harsh name, Death Valley is not actually dead. Plants and animals have adapted to survive in the extreme environment. After rare rainstorms, wildflowers can suddenly bloom across the desert floor, covering the landscape with color. The temporary lake is another reminder that this desert is constantly changing. Sometimes those changes happen slowly over thousands of years. And sometimes One powerful storm can transform everything overnight. Maybe that's why people are so fascinated by Death Valley's disappearing lake. It feels impossible. The driest place suddenly filled with water. The hottest landscape transformed into a giant mirror. It reminds us that nature is always changing, and that even the harshest places on Earth can still surprise us. Because hidden beneath the salt flats of Death Valley is the memory of an ancient lake, waiting for the perfect storm to appear once again.